If it's okay with you, we're going to kind of hang out and visit for a little while and see if we get more people jumping on. Last week, we had several people jump on a few minutes into the session. So maybe that will be the same thing this week. If we don't get the participation for some reason this week, then he has offered a recorded presentation that he has on the subject matter. So it's not like we're just going to dump the whole subject altogether. We will still share some resources. Well, you'll get some information, and then I can follow up with getting some resources to send you as well. So I would like to introduce our presenter this morning, John Hewlett. He's a ranch and farm management specialist. He's with the University of Wyoming. I think he's with the Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics, but I'll let him share more about himself as we kind of see if others log in. Thank you, Ramiro, for being here today. I wasn't sure if you would be able to join us. Now we've got someone else, and we're going to go ahead and record this session. So I just want to let you know that we are recording, and this is the last webinar of the 4-session series. So after a few weeks, we'll get all the webinars processed and we'll get them uploaded, and we'll be letting you know via email when those are ready for access later. Okay, so John, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity, Jan, and Ramiro for the invitation and the chance to actually present some of these materials we've had available, and are happy to try to share out with you in hopes that they might be helpful to your situation. I am an extension farm management specialist. I'm 100% extension, so kind of a unique position in the West. There's not too many of us around that do it. I'm on, as my position is on campus at the University of Wyoming in Laramie, and I've been here a short 37 years, I think, at this point. So I'm I'm going to get done practicing soon and actually figure out how it's done. But I have had the opportunity to work with Ramiro and offer presentations down in your part of the state of California, as well as some of the other parts of the state, working everywhere from specialty type growers to dairy, to even some cattle grower programs we've done most recently out that way in the northern part of the state. So I am somewhat familiar with it. I also grew up in Western Washington, so am familiar with some of the things that go on in the western part of the U.S. And I guess the other thing I could add is we do have a small operation about 20 miles out of Laramie, where I've had the opportunity to train my own children up on some of the chores and other fun activities that go along with having a small farm. So am familiar not only with what some of the things are we face when we manage those things, but also the fun part of record keeping, which is today's topic, of course, that goes along with that, as well as filing your own taxes and a bunch of other components that go with having a small farm. So that's kind of a little bit of background on me, and I don't know if we want to just jump into it or you want to wait a couple more minutes.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing with us a little bit more about yourself. And again, thank you for being here this morning. So I think we're good to go. We are at our kind of minimum level that we talked about. We are recording. I think everything's good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to share your screen. If you have questions, we have reserved some time at the end of the session, like in weeks prior, where we can ask questions, or you can go ahead and enter them in the chat room for now. But we'll probably, unless John wants to stop, we'll probably address them towards the end of the hour. So thanks again, everybody, for being here. I'm going to turn it on over now.
Okay, thank you. And I guess we'll get the right thing chosen here. Okay, so I get a confirmation that you're seeing my slides as we're supposed to see them.
It's small, but
Small. Okay, that probably
Yeah,
means I'm
it
not
looks
doing the
more
right thing.
it looks portrait, like if on a phone,
Hmm.
it's not filling the screen.
That's the challenge of not having another computer to use.
There you oh, there near full screen now.
Cool. The challenge, of course, is I have more than one screen, so
Right.
it's it's kind of a wonder as to which one. Maybe this will be a better shot, huh? Is that better?
No, it's doing the
No.
same thing.
All right.
Interesting. I've never seen this before. You know, of course, when you practice it, it always works fine.
That any
Yeah.
better?
No, it's coming up portrait as if it was on a phone, like a phone screen. So it's like a narrow.
I hear you. I think I know now which option to use, but it's going to require me to change another setting here. So I apologize.
Sure, no problem. Well, I'm curious while you're doing that, can you all, our participants, just kind of notate in the chat if you've been here for all four of the sessions? Just curious if I need to bring up the participant list to see, but we're really glad that you've been able to join us. Okay, now it looks like you just need to activate the presentation. So we see this working slides on the left.
Is that better? No.
Um, did you click on the screen down below? Looks like you did, but I wonder if we just have a time lag. Like the little screen down, yeah, right there or
Yeah, I
close
have
to
it, but
there.
it's on a different screen. So that's the problem
Oh,
is it's getting selected the correct screen. My apologies, but I think we'll get it
okay.
eventually.
One of
Yes.
our guests is on her phone, and so she says it looks great on phone. That's great. I'm glad.
Is that better?
There you go. There we are.
Okay, so
Okay.
now
Signing
I'm
off
gonna
now.
change these.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Okay. We at least have the slides on a screen that's going to show up full screen, so that's helpful. It's different than the way I was planning to do it. Um, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, I have some experience doing these sorts of records for myself. I have offered numerous presentations on the topic, but today what I'm planning to do is to do kind of an overview of record keeping in a really broad context. Clearly, we could get down into the weeds in keeping records on lots of different specific enterprises, lots of different crops or different regulatory reasons for keeping records. And those are important as well. But my understanding of what you all were after this morning was something that's a little broader based. So talking about what we're really after in terms of our goals and objectives with record keeping. And then what I want to show you is a few tools that may be helpful to you in terms of keeping records for yourself. So I have in mind to do some polling as we go along. So hopefully everyone is able to read in this QR code. And I will ask a few different questions as we go along this morning, where you'll be given a vote on your phone. So the deal is you read the QR code in if you haven't done this before, and it'll pull it up on your phone. I can't tell at all how many people are actually doing this right now, and whether you're successful in getting that read in until I get to the next slide where we actually vote. So I guess I will take the risk of jumping ahead here and asking the first question, which is, what type of enterprise is it that you're managing? And we are offering a number of choices here from food grain crops to field crops, feed crops, vegetables, fruit livestock, multi-species livestock, or other. And you can vote on more than one, I think is the way I have this set up. And as you can see on the screen, we can get a count on how many of you are actually able to vote. So get a little bit of an indication of how successful we're being in terms of taking people's input. So it looks like at this point, about half of you are doing fruit and nuts, and some of you are doing other, so fair enough. Um, Next question is, what do you think is the single biggest hurdle to your business success? Is it about managing those crops and making maybe management decisions relative to the production of the crop? Is it about, none of you said livestock, so I'm guessing probably none of you doing that, but is it maybe financial management and how you're managing or facing maybe a lack of information to make good financial decisions? Is it marketing? Looks like at least one of yours thinking maybe human resource management. Now that's a popular challenge for a lot of people across the country at this point in time, both with labor as well as coming up with to folks that have the skills to actually perform in the jobs that we have in mind for them. So, and then we have other, I guess, but looks like several of you have responded across the spectrum. So that's good. We have a number of different kinds of challenges that you think are holding you back, perhaps in terms of your management success. And I'm curious if any of you would say that you have attended a risk management program before. Yes, no, or you're not sure, because we're going to talk a little bit about risk. And obviously, not having good information or not knowing where to go to find information is a kind of risk, as well as challenges with human resources and or business management can bring about different sources of risk as well. So just kind of wondering, we do a lot of programming on risk. I guess that's probably been my single focus for the last 20 years or so is focusing a lot on risk and risk management, which is partly how come we have this records material to draw from this morning. So thank you for that. And I'll ask a number of other questions as we go along, but it is kind of helpful to me to understand where you all are coming from. So appreciate that. What we have in mind to do is to try to do a little background, offering a few kinds of concepts and things to keep in mind, to consider as you go forward in terms of managing. Then thinking a little more about some of the types of records that we might keep. I'm going to point you to a online course that we have available for free that basically offers a number of these points, but you may find helpful following our presentation to go back to refer to and so on, and then talk a little bit about where you might go once we've gone through some of these materials. So that's kind of what I have in mind for this morning's presentation. So record keeping is really important, but it's really boring. And I do realize that, and it's not something that anybody I don't think would get up in the morning and say, hey, boy, I can't wait to get done a little more record keeping today. But it's critical to determining where we are in terms of our business's performance and our ability to decide whether our business is performing well, or if there are some adjustments that we might need to make as we go along, whether it may be short-term adjustments, or some of those adjustments may be a little longer term in nature in terms of keeping the business healthy and actually performing in the way that we are hoping it would do. Unfortunately, this is an area where a lot of producers, and I don't care whether they're big, small, or in between, historically are challenged in terms of skills to keep good financial records. And I don't mean this as a criticism. It's just very challenging to get good information about how to go about keeping records in a consistent and accurate way, as well as how to pull the information that's necessary to make good management decisions from that database. I guess had the privilege, I don't know whether I count it as a privilege or not, but I took a full year of accounting as part of my undergraduate program, and it helped me a great deal once I got into this position and starting to talk about how to help folks, different angles for helping them manage their finances, just having that solid accounting background. But it took a lot of study to be able to get to that place. So I have got that as a background. A lot of producers don't have a place where they can go oftentimes to gain that kind of fundamental training in good record keeping. So as a result, as it says on the slide here, oftentimes when we come together to compare notes or to try to decide whether we are, performing well financially, our financial records are often inconsistent. That is to say, the way that one person keeps them is not necessarily the same as another person keeps them. How they categorize certain, categories of expenses, how they lump things together. Oftentimes, the questions that they're trying to answer are a little short of the mark in terms of trying to decide, what can I get out of the records that I'm already keeping? Do I need to get a little bit tighter on certain areas of record keeping, et cetera. And sometimes the results of our financial analysis that as a result might be misleading, or they might be inaccurate in terms of looking forward. They might give us something for today, but maybe not the kind of information we need to make longer term decisions. So just realize that those are some of the hurdles and challenges we face up front. And I don't think there's actually an easy way to get past it other than to spend some dedicated time to learn. If you've decided that this is something really important, to spend the time to keep a little more consistent and detailed records, assuming that you value those records in order to make good management decisions. So I'm not somebody that advocates just keeping really detailed records for, just because it's good for you. They take a lot of time, and there is a basic level of record keeping that is, obviously required, particularly for tax reasons. And then if you want to answer more detailed questions, or you have specific questions that you need answers to, and your current record keeping won't allow you to get those answers, that's when you start looking to keep more detail and maybe broader set of records, et cetera. So that's the kind of guidance I guess I'm thinking of offering here. Is you need to think about what is your greatest concern, and it varies, of course, depending on your situation, depending on where you've come from, how big you might be, et cetera. So what we have on the screen are some of the items that are concerning to different people, and it depends, again, where you are. So some people are worried about making sure that they're able to provide for their family, and if they can cover that, then that looks like success. Whereas other people may have taken on outside debt, right? And they need to make sure they're servicing that. So how the debt load stacks up against their asset base, how the debt is structured, so how much of it's coming current, that is to say needs paying up, in the near future, versus how much of it remains out into future years is a consideration. Whether or not you're thinking about expanding, whether that might be to be getting bigger or adding additional enterprises, how much you take in the way of government support payments or insurance payments, other kinds of payments that come in that help make your business run. There's a lot of different kinds of considerations as to the level of record keeping that might be appropriate, as well as how you would maybe be concerned about measuring the success of your business. And like the last one says down there, obviously if you're on tight margins, market conditions maybe aren't moving in your direction, sometimes just simply surviving to the next year might be enough success that you'll worry about some of your, other issues down the road. So I do understand about that, but it is important to get that in mind. So what is it that you're going to use as a measure of success and or financial health? And again, it depends where you're at. And I oftentimes use this slide and just ask the question outright and then start feeding in the answers as we go along. Today, I'm not able to ask you that so easily, but for some people, just having a positive cash flow is workable, and that's enough of indication for them that they're moving in the right direction and they don't have a larger worry. Obviously, if you have an outside job that brings in income from other sources, maybe that's where you're at with that. Other people making sure that they're in it, uh, other people who may be in it for the long term, making sure that they're growing their net worth, which is a measure of growing, your financial wherewithal and ability to withstand not only risk, but also other kinds of financial shocks going forward, is another way of measuring it. Some people worry about the level of taxes that they are paying. Other people um, lean on family labor, as it says there, and they are not so worried about necessarily those outside additional expense categories of labor where they may have to pay somebody or hire someone in. But that only is going to work and as long as that family labor is available. I'm afraid that's kind of where we're facing just now with our the last of our 7 children are graduating out of our small farm program, and I'm not sure what we're going to do this next year because he's planning on moving out. So I am aware of how that can work too. Obviously, where you're located could have implications in terms of your access to labor or even assistance in terms of, for example, managing your finances and getting some help in terms of input on how to maybe keep more detailed records and so on. There's a lot of different things that factor into how are you performing on a financial basis. So I'm just offering that as a set of challenges for you and thinking about record keeping and what's an appropriate level of record keeping for the businesses that you're trying to operate and work within. Typically, we think about measuring our financial health uh, based on some areas of financial performance. I'll mention this as we get to the end, but those areas typically are referred to as 5 different areas. Liquidity is your ability to meet your obligations on a cash basis, you might say, going forward over the next 12 months, whereas solvency is thinking about your ability to meet all of your debt obligations over the longer term. Profitability, we might all each have our own idea of what we mean by profit. I'm talking about all the cost and all the income taken together, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along here, but other people think about it as cash returns over cost, and so there's some differences in terms of how we might look at that area. Repayment capacity is thinking about our ability to actually cover our debt payments without impacting the overall business. And then financial efficiency is a concept we use in financial management, thinking about how effectively, you might say, are we turning our dollars of assets into dollars of return over time with our business activity. So probably all I'm going to say about those areas of financial performance, but there are some different ways we can drill down and kind of assess financial health uh, outside of just deciding whether we have cash left over at the end of the year. And that makes a difference because as we think about financial health and whether we are healthy or if we want to try to improve our health, improve our business success over time, there are different steps or different angles that we might take to try to improve things and our long term or long run survivability of the business in general, as well as our owner equity, you might say, and our net worth, and growing that through profit generation over time. So it's important. And I think most people recognize it's important, but often get lost in the details of how to assess whether we're making progress or maybe backtracking. And probably the one sentiment that I took away from one of my colleagues' presentations several years ago is overriding consideration. If you can't measure it, you really can't manage it. And obviously, that's where the record keeping part of it comes in, is to try to get a handle on how well we're doing relative to our goals and objectives for the business. So we come to another polling question here and wondering, how comfortable are you with your current level of records? Are you worried about what records you're currently keeping and whether they're adequate to answer the management decisions or questions that you might have? Are you not sure? Are you confident or somewhere in between? I'll give you a chance to vote here. Like only one of you is brave enough. Okay, to answer. So
John, I'm just going to pipe in. I had to refresh my screen in order to get the new question to load. I don't know if anyone else has that challenge.
yeah, that might happen. I know
So,
that. So thank you. So we got a mix of responses here. Some people are a little more comfortable, others maybe uncomfortable or not sure. So good, good. That's realistically where most of us are, somewhere on the spectrum. Hopefully we'll give you some different ideas here as we go along as to how we might bolster that. So definitely profitability is usually one of the overall goals of folks. It's definitely critical to be profitable or to become profitable as we move forward in order to keep the business functioning. And I'm saying that from the perspective of measuring the business as it stands on its own 2 feet, so to speak. So not feeding in additional dollars from an outside job, not counting on inheritance from Grandma Margie. It's actually thinking about making this business profitable and making sure that the expenses that we generate by being active in the business are covered by the dollars of return that we generate from those activities. And the only way to know that is to look at our record. So this is just kind of a general overview of the field of finance. We think about where would we go to find out whether we're profitable or not. So the area of finance or field of finance is where we're looking at returns to management, taking into account time, certainly risk, as well as the dollars and in and the dollars out, and helps us to establish whether or not we're gaining or falling behind. But it takes into, again, account things that are a little more indirect. So time and risk, for example, are not necessarily only about the dollars and cents. Instead, the area of accounting or the field of accounting is where it is we would turn to look to decide whether we have the information in hand or if we need additional information to decide whether or not we're making progress. So we might use this information from accounting to decide for internal purposes whether or not we might need to manage in a little tighter way, actually apply some controls from the management standpoint. We might use those data for planning. So thinking about, for example, budgeting using last year's numbers as a starting place and looking forward to this next year. Or we might also report to outside entities. So that might be banks or stockholders. It says here we might need to make some reporting to government entities, for example, for participating in some programs. We might also need to report to things like the IRS, right? And so those would all be external reporting reasons. But I would argue those first two reasons are the ones we would want to worry about keeping good, solid, and detailed records so that we can make good management decisions when we're in the management chair, so to speak, in the office and actually trying to decide what are our next steps or how we need to respond if things aren't necessarily going the way we were hoping. So just another kind of a listing here of ways that we can use those records for certainly for legal and institutional uses. So reporting outside of our business, thinking about financial control that we might need to exert or in cooperation with a lender, for example, certainly for budgeting. And then finally, what I would argue is probably the most important reason is for management and making management decisions. We can't do that if we don't have good data to work from. And so that's often the driver behind why people want to improve their record keeping. So in accounting, we will try to if we're keeping detailed and accurate records, we'll try to keep account not only of the cash in and out, most everybody has a good understanding of that, but profit hinges not only on that, but also the other changes in the resources that we use to generate dollars of return. What are some of those other resource areas? You are probably asking, and if you have an ag economist in front of you, they tend to lump things into these broad categories: land, labor, capital, and time. So land is pretty self-explanatory. Labor would not only include external labor, but that's probably captured in terms of the cash flow part of it, what we're paying out. But we're meaning here's labor that might be family labor. Labor on the part of the manager making management decisions is a little different if they're not actually providing hands-on labor, for example. It's a couple different kinds of labor that the owner operator typically provides. And so thinking about stuff that we may not actually be paying dollars out to cover. So the use of the land, the use of, say, family labor or operator labor, capital, we might be borrowing capital from ourselves, in which case we've made an investment. Um, we should probably be earning a return similar to what the lender would be earning, an interest. We actually pay ourselves an interest rate on any capital we have invested. And then the time, meaning, if we're investing or other people are investing in our operation, all of those things should be accounted for when we're thinking about non-cash changes in our business that go along with the cash changes to account for the profitability of the business over time. So you may be wondering, well, what are some of the other non-cash kinds of transactions? That's where people usually get kind of hung up on some of this stuff. And I'm not sure that I'm going to go into it in great deal looking forward here, but let me just say that it includes things like changes in inventory, for example. If we have purchased a number of you know sets of inputs and they're left over for next year. When we use them next year, we need to account for that. If we have things like depreciation, so things like equipment, buildings, other kinds of improvements that we've put on our place, hoop structures or other kinds of row covers, those kind of things, depending on the crops and the kind of agriculture we're involved in. Those all typically last more than 1 year in some cases. And so that's the kind of stuff we're talking about accounting for that are non-cash in nature. If we want to have a good read of profit, we need to account not only for the cash, but also the non-cash changes, taking into account everything that the business is using to generate the dollars of return in order to fairly assess whether or not we're making a profit or a return over all costs. So just again, kind of a summary there, but it's it's again the thing that a lot of people get hung up on, and there are ways to account for it. I'm not obviously going to be able to offer a course in double entry accounting today, but those are the kinds of topics that you get into and are really important to keeping records on, in addition to the cash in and cash out. So with that, let's talk about financial records and how we might go about keeping some of those. What should we keep in terms of a complete record keeping system? If we're going to be able to assess our financial performance, we need to keep track, obviously, of the cash in and out, but we also need to keep accounting of our changes in inventories. So we just mentioned that. Might also be financial inventories, depending on how our business is structured. We may be holding dollars of return and at different levels. We need to be able to pull all that together at some point in the year, or maybe even more than once in the year, to assess how we're doing. Those are oftentimes pulled together in the form of financial statements as a way of organizing that information down to just a short set of forms. Production records in terms of how we're doing in the way of yields, how we're doing in terms of applications, for example, to control pests or diseases, and whether or not those applications are helping us to improve our yields or improve our product quality. Production records in terms of what's actually going in versus what we're getting out physically. Okay. Labor and machinery records, another important set of records. Uh, Family accounts. Here, we want to definitely keep track of what we're doing in the way of the family business accounts or family personal accounts, separate from the business that we're trying to assess. So when I'm talking about record keeping through this presentation, I'm referring to the business itself and tracking what the business is doing as I said earlier, on its own 2 feet. What's actually coming in from business activities in the way of returns, dollars of revenue, versus expenses that are incurred by the production that we're doing and growing a crop or raising livestock, et cetera, buying new inputs, et cetera. And then there are some different kinds of record summaries we might also look at doing that are not what we would call financial statements, but pulling together summaries and or sub-accounting of different categories of performance. For example, if we have more than one crop, we might want to summarize our dollars of return and expenses together for a particular crop as compared to another. I would call that an enterprise summary or an enterprise budget, if you will, enterprise performance statement. So looking at how did I do over this last year versus a budget typically is thinking about going forward and planning for that in the coming year. So a bunch of different ways and different kinds of records that we might think about keeping. This question is a polling question wondering about what level of records are you currently keeping or maintaining for the enterprises that you're involved in. Are you at one end of that spectrum with basically no records? Are you thinking that you are not sure, I guess is what I've got at the opposite end, or are you keeping some basic records, some kind of production records at the current time? And I guess if you have to refresh your screen, that might be one of those things. You get that to come up there on your phone, but if you take a minute to vote on those, it's a little bit helpful to gain a perspective on what kind of records you're currently involved in. And this isn't meant as a criticism. I'm just kind of trying to get a handle on where you all might be with that. So it looks like some are suggesting they're only keeping what are basic records, and then some are keeping production records. I think you can vote more than one, but again, there's a lot of different levels, and it makes sense to keep records that help you as a manager. It isn't necessarily that you should keep every record that's possible. I'm not trying to advocate for that, but if you're looking at trying to get forward and how to improve record keeping, I guess I've got a few suggestions now going forward. So one of the things I can offer as a resource, and I'll give you the URL for this at the end, so you don't have to get it down just now, but it's basically an online course that we created to help people who maybe don't have all the records that they are hoping they would like or thinking they would like to have, hoping to have to make better management decisions. And so like I said, I'll give you the URL for that, but we started it off because we know that record keeping isn't a very fascinating topic in itself. We started it off with these 4 different stories. So trying to help people better see how records can help answer management decisions as they keep the records going forward and then later may need those to answer certain questions. So I was going to walk through a couple of slides here for the 4th story, which is called 4-H Gone Hog Wild. And basically it lays out a kind of a 4-H or farm, FFA kind of farm activity on the part of one of the children in this family. They have a small place, so they've got chickens, layers that they're raising, as well as some meat birds, corn they produce for feed, and then some hogs. And it's a situation where mom and dad actually have some outside financing, but they are encouraging their young people to get involved in these kind of youth programs. And Juan is our superstar here, where he develops a really strong interest in developing the hog enterprise to go further than maybe just to have a 4-H project. So he basically was successful in having the hogs as a project, but then when things started snowballing, they had a series of litters, and they were able to sell those and make some pretty good money off of that. The second year, they had even more litters because they had some more sows, and things started to really build, and people started asking for how they might be able to get, some of Pablo's pigs. And so they were going along, and they basically got to a place where their parents were the parents were basically saying, well, this looks like an expansion. We might need to actually plan for not only the facilities to make this work, but also, how we're going to finance it because the feed bill and a bunch of other things are starting to become a little more challenging. So the um, the thing is that in order to expand, they needed good records to actually analyze or answer some of these questions that come up. So how were they producing? How much were they generating in terms of dollars return on a per pig basis or a per sow basis? How much feed were they using versus, what were they getting in terms of the return? A lot of the basic questions that oftentimes come up when you grow an enterprise from what might be a hobby to begin with, but when it is successful, you may not have all the answers to deciding, how big should you get or what scope or scale makes sense. So that's kind of the scenario. And the point is, in that particular course, is that they needed records to answer those questions. Now, in the course, it walks through a few more slides and tells about how Pablo, with the records, was able to get a loan from a lender that makes loans to youth, and they grew their enterprise into a much larger and profitable enterprise. But the point in the story is that they needed the records to answer the questions. So this is the main menu from the course itself, and the way it works is as you go through some of those different stories, you can access what are these content modules that are listed here on this slide, or you can go back and view one or another one of the vignettes or stories. I was going to delve into a little bit of what's behind some of these materials that are available here, and one of those at the bottom in terms of the resource menu lists out a bunch of other supporting material that is included with this course. So, for example, if you are looking to improve other kinds of physical records, so specifically tied to crops, chemical log, fertilizer log, might be just some field inventory records or harvesting records. There's a number of different example forms here for crop enterprises put together from a couple of our colleagues in the West. For livestock, similarly, is another set of records put together by another colleague, but outlining. And again, these are just example forms, so you could download them and modify them to fit your needs. But talking about just some basic animal records, whether it's health records or production records, et cetera. There are also included some different spreadsheets for doing some basic evaluation of the performance of some of these. Looks like in these cases are livestock records in particular. But the one I wanted to talk a little bit more about is the one that's labeled with the tab called AG Record Keeping System. So this was a record-keeping system developed by the fellow who had my job before me, and developed it in working with producers over a couple different decades actually, who didn't back in the day before computerized records. And I think it's kind of an innovative hand record-keeping system you may find helpful. So the spreadsheets are available on this course. You can download those, you can modify them. You could also print them off and use them for entries. So I'm going to walk through how that actually works, but it's essentially a double entry system without having to be so wise as to know about all the details of a double entry accounting system you might learn about in getting a degree in some university where they talk it through in great detail. So it essentially allows you to keep track of some of these non-cash, or in this case, it's labeled accrual income and expense information. So the worksheets and the detail are available in here to allow you to keep track of the records that you would need to answer those kind of questions. You could also use it as a cash only system if you want. But let me just kind of walk through how that would work. There's a series of different sheets that are included again in that list that we were looking at a minute ago on the course, so you can download those. But it basically allows you to keep track of your cash income, expenses, your assets, and your liabilities, as well as pull together some basic balance sheet and income statements or financial statement information. So the way that would work is like this. So we have the cash income sheet, And these are ledger sheets, so they actually are quite wide. I've only got the first few columns to the right here, but showing the left-hand columns where we would record, for example, the date, some brief description. If there's a number or weight, we would enter that, as well as the price per unit, and then we have the total, as you can see in column 3, and we write those in there. And these, by the way, are in spreadsheet form on the course. So if you download them, they're actually in Excel sheets. You could actually use those directly if you want to type in them, and you could save them out and and make copies and so on. But then for every row that we enter some kind of a description and have a deposit recorded for on the left, we then allocate that to some account, if you will, on the right. So it might be livestock, as you can see in column 4, or it might be a crop. Column 6 is for interest. So different kinds of income that we might allocate that to and report it or record it. And so essentially we're getting a left and a right entry that creates the double entry, and it allows us to double check that we've got things entered correctly over time as we use these sheets. So that's the income section. I probably wouldn't use that quite as often as our expense section, but it too is laid out with kind of a similar format where we would report the date, description, a check number, and then a total. And then we would allocate that to various expense accounts across over to the right. Again, this sheet's narrow to display it on the screen, but it has quite a few more columns to the right. And you would get to write in there, the labels that make sense for your business. So again, kind of a double entry system without maybe some of the pain that goes along with that in some other kinds of accounting systems. This one is an asset account. So thinking about things of value that we have. So it could be inventories, could be machinery and equipment. In this case, it's cows. And so we have described at the top the name of the type of asset that we're keeping track of and the value that we have it in here at. Then if we add some, we have the number and value. If we remove any of those cows through either sales or death loss, we would record those in terms of number and value. We have a column there for depreciation in column 5, as well as then we calculate a balance on hand to the right. So we keep a running total, so to speak, as we move through, and it may be multiple years that some of these asset sheets would be used for. But the idea is you would have a sheet for every one of your assets that you wanted to set it up and start tracking. Similarly, for various liabilities or loan accounts, in this case, we have an operating loan, but if you had a mortgage or some other kind of loans, you would describe that at the top. We have the amount added for various new balances that would be added in. So operating loans, we may be adding to our operating line through the year, any amounts that we're paying off as we go through the year, and then the balance that's left remaining, either on an annual basis, it may be summed up, or maybe if you calculate a new total on some other basis like quarterly, whatever. So again, this operating loan sheet or this page may last for more than 1 year, but the idea is you would add to it at the bottom, and then, as you needed to, you would add or move on to a new page and so on through your various operating years. The course also offers some summary financial statements. So there's a balance sheet showing the assets on the right and the liabilities and net worth on the right. Sorry, assets are on the left, liabilities and net worth on the right. Those are the two categories that basically need to be in balance in the balance sheet. I know we're not talking about financial statements today, but that's available as well as an income statement. It allows you to summarize the information from these various deposits and expense sheets all together to decide whether or not your business is profitable. The final piece that you would need to do that is the accrual adjustment worksheet. So keeping track of the non-cash expenses and income that might need to be accounted for to correctly account for the accrual net income, which is a measure of your profitability over time. So I know I'm touching on some other concepts that aren't necessarily about record keeping per se, but this set of hand records is a great way to kind of get started with that and to see how those pieces might fit together for you going forward without some large expense in terms of a computerized system. So going back to the main menu, we see that we have a number of other categories of information on the bottom. It has a help screen that walks you through how to use this course online. It's a lot of vernacular or terms that are used in accounting that you might struggle with. I know I used to get stuck on some of these in my classwork, but we've put a whole lot of them in here and by alphabetical uh, index, so you can click on the letters or move down, scroll on the left and move down and get some of that where you might get confused to try to help you keep track. A lot of frequently asked questions to help you maybe move through some of those things that get you stuck. And again, where do we go from here? We move from this general introduction to accounting to talking about some computerized systems and so on. But let me just mention that these different modules that are here in the middle section talk about some other really basic concepts, some ways to think about getting started with the basic accounting, some easy, it says 5 easy steps, keeping production records, financial records, and then some records to do with the Schedule F tax accounting. So those are some modules that are in here that walk you through some of the detail in addition to the resource section we've just kind of jumped through very quickly. And so where do we go from here? I'm not actually going to go through that section of the course, but to help you again understand that the records are good and they're oftentimes needed to answer some basic sorts of things like Pablo faced in his enterprise and trying to expand. But oftentimes those records I still have a lot of detail in them that is difficult to discern how are we doing over time. So financial statements are a way of summarizing those records. And there are several basic financial statements that we might pull together, balance sheet and income statement we've just looked at here, but can help us evaluate performance. And we might compare that set of statements over time and what they say, as well as compiling or developing what are called financial ratios and indices in what we would call a level of financial management called financial analysis. So we talked about that a little bit earlier in terms of liquidity, solvency, profitability, efficiency, and repayment capacity, those areas of financial analysis. And again, those numbers usually don't tell us too much on a particular 1-year basis, but rather looking at a trend and how are we doing over longer periods of time with these different ratios can help us better understand which areas of our business we might need to focus on to improve financial performance over time as we move forward. So with that really brief introduction, I'm curious what areas of record keeping would you maybe intend to focus on improving going forward into the future? I think this is a, well, similar list, I guess, to the one we offered earlier with crop, livestock, income records, expense records, or all financial records, and then other, I guess, is another choice. So got a couple people, looks like saying all financial records, and some maybe more wanting to focus on the crop records, maybe to get a better handle on how those enterprises are performing in terms of the crops themselves. Great, thank you for that input. I would just offer that we have developed a number of courses that are online. The record keeping course is one. We also have a couple of others that focus on financial statements and financial performance. As diverse a topics as legacy planning or transition planning to the next generation, management succession, a whole bunch of other kinds of courses. And today, I just point out that we've been focusing on the Ag Records course itself, but we have others that you can check out. All of them are free of charge and are available online. You can check out, we have a number of tools to help folks make management decisions once they have the records that will allow them to populate the tools with. If you want to take a look at those, they also are available at no charge. Every one of them has a guide that goes along and explains how the tool might be used, as well as gives some examples with information in there and how to interpret the results, et cetera. So offer that if it might be of help to you. And with that, I guess I'll say I'm open to questions, although it looks to me like we are just about out of time. Maybe I'll just move through to my last 2 polling questions and ask first, If you thought the presentation on ag records was useful, you can completely agree, you're not sure, etc. So if you want to offer a response on that, I would appreciate it. Okay. And then the next one is there something out of this presentation that you might intend to apply? So maybe going and taking a look at one of those online resources, or uh, looking online for some other kinds of information that might help you move forward with your record keeping in terms of some of the things we brought up and touched on today. All right, well, thank you for those answers. Here are the promised URLs and what I guess I was touching on in terms of resources. I'd be happy to try to answer questions. I know we only had a limited amount of time, really, and if I had had my preference, I would have, first of all, been able to ask questions more readily, engage the audience. I'd like to engage folks and try to answer the questions that people may have, as opposed to necessarily moving through all the slides. But I've got my contact information here on the screen. If you want to capture that with your phone or whatever, I'd be happy to, again, try to point you in the right direction or answer questions if you have those following today's discussion. So with that, Jan, I guess those are my slides and my presentation. And if you have anything coming in from the audience, or if there are
Yes.
questions you might have, I'd be happy to take those at this point.
Yes, thank you, John. We really appreciated your presentation and the information. I just did want to confirm, because we did have someone ask for the URL. So that's the rightrisk.org courses, correct? For the record
Yeah,
keeping course? Okay.
yeah. So
Um,
basically, if you go to the Right Risk site, there's a tab that says courses, and you
courses.
can drop that
Okay.
down and select the record keeping course out of that to take a look at that.
Okay, great. And then another question, are any of the resources available in other languages such as Spanish?
That, I'm afraid, we do not have.
Do
There
not have,
are some
okay.
resources that are tied to the Right Risk site that are in Spanish.
Ah,
And yeah, there is something that Ramiro and I worked on years ago that are a series of webinars that are recorded that include some that are in Spanish. And I think we touched on some of these basic kinds of management questions, management systems, and so on within those webinar series. That's at aganuncertaintimes.org
okay.
or farmmanagement.org. I think you can also get it to that, get there. Um, That's been a
Okay.
few years ago, but there are quite a number of webinars that we
Okay.
recorded, and several of those, like I'm guessing it's like 15 or something like that, we did that were in Spanish language. So
Bilingual.
that might be a set of resource that would be helpful to somebody just
Okay.
trying to get started. Mhm.
All right. We'll make sure that we include that in our resource list that we send out to everybody as part of our follow-up to the webinar. Someone, I think Maggie had her hand raised, but now she has left the room. So if there's any other questions, please go ahead and raise your hand or type it. You can just type it in the chat if you want. Um, Otherwise, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Just kind of give it a 30 seconds here to see if anyone's typing. We got some thank yous. Yes, thank you, John. It was great. Really appreciated you being here with us today and sharing this great information.
Well, we very much appreciate the opportunity. I hope it helps you get started. I realize that
Yeah,
we're only a limited amount of time and
right.
and topics we could get over, but there are, at the end, it depends a lot of times on the audience and their perspective as to which is the right angle to take, and hopefully we've hit kind of a middle ground today. So
Yeah. Well,
appreciate
it
the
was great to
chance
meet
to
you.
talk.
Yeah, thank you. Just real quick before everyone signs off, if you can go ahead and give us your feedback in the survey link posted in the chat room, we really appreciate it. It does make a big difference and helps us out for program development and funding reporting and so on and so forth. So please, thanks for doing that. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now. We will be following up with everybody via email and sharing some information with you, these resource links, and we'll let you know when all the recordings are available. So, all right. I think we're going to go ahead and call it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.